But cyberspace was not the only imaginary story being created. Faced with the humiliating defeat in the Lebanon, President Reagan's government was desperate to shore up the vision of a moral world where a good America struggled against evil. And to do this, they were going to create a simple villain, an imaginary enemy, one that would free them from the paralyzing complexity of real Middle Eastern politics. And the perfect candidate was waiting in the wings: Colonel Gaddafi, the ruler of Libya. The Americans were going to ruthlessly use Colonel Gaddafi to create a fake terrorist mastermind. As a young officer, Gaddafi had been sent to England for training, and he had detested the patronising racism that he said he had found at the heart of British society.
Yes, I attended a course. I have been in England since 1966, from April to August.
You had the best months?
I was in Beaconsfield, a village called Beaconsfield, in Army School. In fact, we ill-treated in that place from some British officers. I think those officers were Jews, maybe Jews.
But ill-treated in what sort of way?
In many ways. They ill-treat us every time.
By being rude or by being bullying or?
In their all behavior towards us, they ill-treat us. They hate us anyhow because of colonization. It is a result of colonialism.
Once in power, Gaddafi had developed his own revolutionary theory, which he called the Third Universal Theory. It was an alternative, he said, to communism and capitalism. He published it in a green book, but practically no one read it. He had sent money and weapons to the IRA in Ireland to help them overthrow the British ruling class. But all the other Arab leaders rejected him and his ideas. They thought that he was mad. And by the mid-1980s, Gaddafi was an isolated figure, with no friends and no global influence. Then suddenly that changed. In December 1985, terrorists attacked Rome and Vienna airports simultaneously, killing 19 people, including 5 Americans. There was growing pressure on President Reagan to retaliate.
It's time to rename your State Department the Capitulation Department. Get off of your stick, Mr. President. The American people are sick and tired of being kicked around. You talk tough. Let's see you use some of these billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons that you've asked us to approve. Your words are cheap talk.
President Reagan immediately announced that Colonel Gaddafi was definitely behind the attacks.
These murderers could not carry out their crimes without the sanctuary and support provided by regimes such as Colonel Gaddafi's in Libya. The Rome and Vienna murders are only the latest in a series of brutal terrorist acts committed with Gaddafi's backing.
But the European security services who investigated the attacks were convinced that Libya was not involved at all, and that the mastermind behind the attacks was in fact Syria, that the terrorists had been directed by the Syrian intelligence agencies.
But the Americans say that the attack at Rome airport was organized by Gaddafi, not by Damascus.
No,
what do you say?
We don't have any evidence.
You have no evidence
supporting such affirmation. The only evidence we have shows a Syrian connection.
You say that it was Libya, and the president said the evidence of Libya's culpability was irrefutable.
Yeah.
But the Italian authorities to whom I've spoken say emphatically on the record that their investigations have shown that it was entirely masterminded by Syria.
I don't agree with that at all.
Well, they've interrogated the surviving terrorists.
I must just say I don't agree with that.
But you've no evidence that Libya was in on the planning either.
Our evidence on Libya is circumstantial but very strong.
But why does the President then say it's irrefutable if you call it circumstantial?
Well, people can be convicted and sentenced in our courts on circumstantial evidence.
But what made it even more confusing was that although there seemed to be no evidence that Gaddafi had been behind the attacks, he made no attempt to deny the allegations. Instead, he went the other way and turned the crisis into a global drama.
It is not a time of saying, it is a time of work, time of confrontation.
Threatening suicide attacks against America.
This hostile position cannot be explained in racist and crusade terms. Suicidal attacks will have to be an answer to a military attack. But Libya is not affected by such measures that Reagan has declared. Stinking, rotten crusader.
Gaddafi now started to play a role that was going to become very familiar. He grabbed the publicity that had been given to him by the Americans and used it dramatically. He promoted himself as an international revolutionary who would help to liberate oppressed peoples around the world, even the blacks in America. Gaddafi arranged for a live satellite link to a mass meeting of the Nation of Islam in Chicago.
Brothers and sisters, it is with great honor and privilege that I present to you the leader of the Al-Fatah revolution from Libya, our brother Muammar al-Gaddafi.
Gaddafi told them that Libya was now their ally in their struggle against white America.
And to express my full support and support of my country to your struggle for freedom, for emancipation.
Gaddafi promised that he would supply weapons to create a black army in America of 400,000 men. If white America refuses to accept blacks as US citizens, he told them, it must therefore be destroyed. Gaddafi also invited a group of German rocket scientists to come to Libya to build him a rocket. He insisted it had no military purpose. Libya was now going to explore outer space.
I think it is peaceful and civilian activity for investigation of space and something like this. And it has nothing to do with any military things.
But no one believed him. Journalists warned that Gaddafi was really preparing to attack Europe, vividly dramatizing the new danger.
That is something like this, which goes that way, to put something into space. But the same device, tilted, say, to an angle of 45 degrees, could, of course, become something very different. A missile possibly carrying a warhead. That would put Libya within range of an enormous area. A chilling proposition with its range of 2,000 kilometers.
The Americans and Gaddafi now became locked together in a cycle of mutual reinforcement. In the process, a powerful new image was created that was going to capture the imagination of the West. Gaddafi became a global supervillain, at the head of what was called a rogue state. A madman who threatened the stability of the world. And Gaddafi was loving every minute of it.
Does he think in the past his decisions sometimes have been taken too quickly?
Maybe.
On world affairs?
Maybe.
I think sometimes that is what has made people in the world nervous of you, perhaps.
Maybe.
Then there was another terrorist attack at a discotheque in West Berlin. A bomb killed an American soldier and injured hundreds. The Americans released what they said were intercepts by the National Security Agency that proved that Colonel Gaddafi was behind the bombing, and a dossier that they said proved that he was also the mastermind behind a whole range of other attacks. President Reagan ordered the Pentagon to prepare to bomb Libya. But again, there were doubts, this time within the American government itself. There were concerns that analysts were being pressured to make a case that didn't really exist. And to do it, they were taking Gaddafi's rhetoric about himself as a global revolution and his manic ravings, and then representing them as fact. And in the process, together, the Americans and Gaddafi were constructing a fictional world.
The analyst was certainly, I'm convinced, pressured into developing a prima facie case against the Libyan government. From the somewhat incoherent ravings of a maniac, both interceptions of a clandestine nature and interceptions of a open radio broadcasts or whatever, as well as other sources, quotations of his, that one can assemble a neatly put together package demonstrating that the man had violent interests against the United States and its European allies.
The European intelligence agencies told the Americans that they were wrong, that it was Syria that was behind the bombing, not Libya. But the Americans had decided to attack Libya because they couldn't face the dangerous consequences of attacking Syria. Instead, they went for Gaddafi, a man without friends or allies.
Libya were less downside consequences, if you will. There's less Arab support for Gaddafi. We figured there would be less Soviet support for Gaddafi. There's no question but what Libya was more vulnerable than Syria and Iran.
It was a soft
and
target.
That is certainly an element, of course.
In April 1986, the Americans attacked Libya. Their targets included Colonel Gaddafi's own house. Immediately after the attack, Gaddafi appeared in the ruins to describe what had happened.
The family were asleep, and my wife was, that day, tied down to the bed because she had a slip disc. I tried to rescue the children, and the house started to collapse, as you can see, and the books started to burn. They concentrated on the children's room so that they would kill all the children. Our small adopted daughter was killed, and 2 of our children were injured.
But yet again, Gaddafi might have been lying. Ever since then, there have been rumours that his adopted daughter actually survived. But many other children were killed in the raid because the American bombing was so inaccurate. Gaddafi realised that the attention of the whole world was now focused on him, and he grabbed the moment to promote his own revolutionary theory, the Third Way, as a global alternative to democracy.
I feel that I'm really responsible for conveying the Third World Theory and the Green Book to the rising generation, to the young American and British people, so that we can rescue America and Britain and these generations of young people from this theory this electoral party theory, which enabled an imbecile like Reagan to rule the mightiest power on earth and use it to destroy other people's homes, and enabled a harlot like Thatcher to rule a great nation like Britain.
Look at that. What the heck is that? Oh my God. Look at that. Holy crap. It's just moving really slowly. Wow.
What is it doing?
What the heck?
Guys, it's a freaking
Whoa!
Oh my gosh!
What
Dude,
is happening?
What is happening?
What is going on?
Oh my gosh, Tom!
Holy shit.
Oh my god, guys!
Guys, is that a freaking UFO? Wait, can you get a good video? Good. What is it? What the hell?
In the 1980s, more and more people in the United States reported seeing unexplained objects and lights in the sky. At the same time, investigators who believed in UFOs revealed that they had discovered top-secret government documents that stated that alien craft had visited Earth. The documents had been hidden for 20 years, and they seemed to prove that there had been a giant cover-up. But actually, the reality was even stranger. The American government might have been making it all up, that they had created a fake conspiracy to deliberately mislead the population. The lights that people imagined were UFOs may in reality have been new high-technology weapons that the US government were testing. The government had developed the weapons because they, in turn, imagined that the Soviet Union was far stronger than it was, and still wanted to conquer the world. The government wanted to keep the weapons secret, but they couldn't always hide their appearance in the skies. So it is alleged that they chose a number of people to use to spread the rumour that these were really alien visitations. One of those chosen was called Paul Benovitz, who lived outside a giant airbase in New Mexico and had noticed strange things going on.
Years later, I sat down with Paul at dinner and told Paul exactly that everything we did was a sanctioned counterintelligence operation to convince him that what he was seeing was UFOs, and that what we didn't want him to know was that he tapped into something on the base, and we didn't want him to ever disclose that. We kind of planted the seed in Paul that what he was seeing and what he was hearing and what he was collecting was, in fact, probably maybe UFOs.
Benovitz and others chosen by the agency were, it is alleged, given a series of forged documents. Many of them were top-secret memos by the military describing sightings of unidentified aerial vehicles. The documents spread like wildfire, and they formed the basis for the wave of belief in UFOs that would spread through America in the 1990s.
What the fuck is that, nigga? That's crazy, bro. Is that space,
And it also fueled the wider, growing belief that governments lied to you, that conspiracies were real. What the Reagan administration were doing, both with Colonel Gaddafi and with the UFOs, was a blurring of fact and fiction. But it was part of an even broader program. The president's advisors had given it a name. They called it perception management, and it became a central part of the American government during the 1980s. The aim was to tell dramatic stories that grabbed the public imagination, not just about the Middle East, but about Central America and the Soviet Union. And it didn't matter if the stories were true or not, providing they distracted people, and you, the politician, from having to deal with the intractable complexities of the real world.
Reality became less and less of an important factor in American politics. It wasn't what was real that was driving anything, or the facts driving anything. It was how you could turn those facts, or twist the facts, or even make up the facts to make your opponent look bad. So perception management became a device, and the facts could be twisted. Anything could be anything. It becomes, how can you manipulate the American people?
And in the process, reality becomes what?
Reality becomes simply something to play with to achieve that end. Reality is not important in this context. Reality is simply something that you handle.